So the next thing we need to think about is preparing for our entrepreneurial journey. And the mindset that comes with being an employee versus an entrepreneur can be very different. And we need to consider the ways in which we have to adjust our thinking to prepare for this change. This is something that I did not think about in the process of starting my firm, but I find very important. We really need to shift our mindset for this transition. So when you're an employee, the accountability is often shared across the organization. And as a business owner, we're ultimately accountable for every aspect of the business, from our clients' needs to making sure that we make salary for our employees, for the well-being of our employees, and to our own compliance. And then not only the day-to-day tasks as well, but really the big picture and long-term goals of the business. So this level of responsibility can be scary, and we have to work to develop our risk tolerance. So I shared with a good friend of mine when I started my business that I felt really scared all of the time. And her response to me was that all business owners feel this way. And she said, you have to just lean into the fear, acknowledge it, and accept that it's part of the process and keep going. And I think that conversation comes up for me at any time when I am feeling, that there are challenges that are arising or I have that fear. And so I would say to all of you that is a natural thing that every person that starts their firm, any owner, any entrepreneur that you talk to will tell you that they too have those moments of fear, and it's natural. And to, really not let it prevent you from your goals. So for those of you starting your journey, I would love to hear in the Q&A if you are feeling fearful about this process and potentially why. Like, what is your greatest fear about making the leap? And just take a minute or two to answer that. I know that I'm seeing a couple people mention being financially stable, legal issues. Yes, that's a great one. Income. Yeah, not making as much as in the corporate world. These are all like very valid answers. And okay. I love, someone said imposter syndrome. And I will tell you, I think it's rare for someone to not suffer from imposter syndrome. Even now at this point, I still have it on a regular basis. So I think all of these feelings are natural, and we can, by planning as much as we can in advance and preparing, we can help to prevent some of these, fears, as well as them actually coming into fruition, right? So additionally, we really need to make a plan for how we're going to balance the demands of running our business with our personal life and avoiding burnout. So making sure that you're revisiting your values and motivations, and that these are aligned with what you want personally and professionally. So make a plan for where your boundaries will be with work. Will you work weekends? What will your response time look like for clients? How are you going to decompress when you have stressful moments? And some of these things we're already experiencing in our regular working lives, but the challenges can be a little bit different. So really considering your plan for how you're going to make sure that you find a balance. And as a burnout specialist, Lynette had some great advice on this as well. So let's take a look at what she had to say.
Such an important question. The area that you're most prone to burnout is going to be in the areas that do touch your why. And what I mean by that is your heart is most in your purpose, your calling. And burnout is characterized by caring too much for too long. So your why is going to be something inherently that you care about deeply, which means that it's the area where you're going to be most likely to overextend and create that emotional exhaustion. So I didn't realize for a long time that the thing I cared about most is the thing that could become the biggest driver of exhaustion. A point to counter that is to give yourself the freedom to realize that variety is a huge burnout buffer. If you figure you're using this one muscle over and over again, you're going to overwork it and exhaust it. And so you need to work out the whole body. So if you're spending a lot of time doing similar tasks back to back to back, give yourself variety to do something on your to-do list, maybe that's a different style of work. So using variety in your mind, in your body, mixing it up can be a big burnout buffer and can make a huge difference even when you're busy.
So I really think that the point that she made about the fact that our why can often be where we tend to burn out, because that's what we care the most about, is an important thing just to be mindful of and remember. And again, make sure you have a plan for preventing it, because when you are running your own business, as we said, kind of everything stops with you and you are responsible for everything. And so making sure that you are also caring for yourself in the process so that we don't get burned out. So the last thing that we need to talk about is in this area is how to learn from our mistakes and celebrate our wins. So inevitably you'll make mistakes. We all do. I've made a ton of them. That's why I'm sharing today, because I made mistakes and I want to help other people not make them. So what we really need to think about is that consider each mistake and what you've learned from it. Think about what you would do differently and try not to linger on it too long, and try not to be too fearful of making one, because we all do. So consider your takeaway and what you would change when you do make a mistake, and then move on. There are no mistakes or failures, only lessons. So what lesson do you learn? What is your takeaway? And then keep going. So we've discussed our why and our motivations, as well as our core values. And I hope that you'll dig into those a little bit more after the webinar. But how are we going to accomplish building this business that we desire? So there are some key elements that can help us build a solid foundation from the outset, from the very beginning. And one of the ways that we can do that is by creating a well thought out business plan. And this is probably no surprise that it's on the list to any of you, but following the plan may not necessarily take place, but the process of actually thinking about the plan itself and covering some key areas that we need to focus on can be really helpful. So consider all legal and financial aspects, and we're going to dig into these a little bit more, and process documentation, which is a big one, and we will come back to soon. So there are a lot of really great resources available online, such as through the Small Business Administration, to help you create a really detailed business plan. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it, but I just want to touch on some elements that you should be sure to include and think about at a minimum, even if you don't go and actually create a business plan, which not everyone does, right? So having this mapped out is really going to help you build confidence and gain clarity as you go through this process. Having a clear vision and mission statement. Why does your firm exist, and what are you trying to achieve by building it? Who are your ideal clients? What's your target market? To find our ideal clients, we first have to know who they are, right? So we really need to think about this and map that out. Who are your competitors and what makes your business unique? So for my firm, we pride ourselves on being very available to our clients and working with them, not just on their financial transactional pieces and financial reporting, but really being a trusted advisor in the nonprofit space. And, using our extensive nonprofit knowledge to do so. So what makes you stand out? What makes your business different? And then we need to consider what some of our services offered will be. Oh, yes. I see Carrie in the Q&A has mentioned that Simon Sinek's books, Start With Why. I haven't actually read this, but I have heard that those are great books. So definitely check that out. She said, Simon Sinek, Start With Why. Okay, so back to our services. What are you offering? If you're doing bookkeeping services, will you do cleanups and project work? Are you only going to serve monthly clients? Will you offer tax prepper, planning, auditing, CFO services? My suggestion would be to start small and don't try to do everything. Focus on a few key areas and grow from there once you're ready to add additional services. I made the mistake, and I think probably a lot of us do, because I think it's in our nature as accountants and bookkeepers to try to do all of the things for our clients all of the time. And so saying yes to too many things, and also adding services that I wasn't necessarily prepared to add because a client had a need. So really try to define your services, stay within them, and then make a methodical, informed decision about when you want to offer an additional service. Because this will allow you to fine tune your processes and a few key services that you're offering. And it'll just make it so much easier on you when you're starting out. So financial projections. What are your startup costs, revenue goals, your continuing expenses? We're all accountants and bookkeepers here, so we're very familiar with this area. Then we want to talk about our financial and legal considerations and some of the practical aspects of setting up your business. So when you're moving from employee to entrepreneur, you'll need to address a lot of legal and financial considerations. And I did see somebody mention in the Q&A that was one of their biggest fears, was the legal aspects. So when I got my business started, something that I will mention is that I listened to and took advice from those around me, and, took their input probably a little bit more so than I should have. I would tell you to trust your gut. So I was receiving advice from people who weren't entrepreneurs and actually weren't in the accounting field. And they would say to me, just start. You don't need to have every single piece in place. Just get going. And my instincts told me this was wrong. And instead of listening to them, my instincts, I listened to other people. And that was after a lot of pressure, because it was taking me a little while to get things going, because I'm an over preparer. And to be honest, I would say that this was my first failure. Once my business started, it grew faster than I expected it to. I was drinking from a fire hose, and I felt really unprepared for the growth because I didn't put some of these foundational pieces in place that I knew were important. So I would say, above everything else in this process, trust your gut and your instincts, because you know what is best for you. So we need to consider our legal structure and how we're going to set that up. Sole proprietorship, LLC. Are you going to be an LLC with an S Corp designation? So this is something that a lot of us are probably already familiar with, but you have to think about what your legal structure is going to be, because it has legal, financial, and tax implications going forward. Make sure that you understand the business licenses that are needed to operate in your area. So different states have different rules about registering your business. So really make sure that you research it and understand it before you get started. And financial considerations. So this is a big one. Everyone is in a different place, right? So how are you going to get started? Are you going to continue to work while starting your business? Or do you have maybe a savings so you can leave your prior job in order to get your business going? I heard someone say in the Q&A earlier that they were planning on making this kind of like a side job. And so really think about that. Keep in mind that to set up a business bank account, of course, you first have to generally be registered. In my state, we have to register with the Secretary of State, apply for a federal tax ID, and that's all just to get our own business bank account. And you really obviously don't want to use a personal account. So Financial is a big one. I would be interested to hear in the Q&A for those of you that are kind of, most people here are considering taking that leap. What is your plan for getting started financially speaking? Are you staying in your job and growing your business at the same time? Do you have kind of a savings set aside? So let me know in the Q&A. Love to hear. So this goes back to someone mentioning that they had concerns about the legal aspect. So business insurance is really important, right? We need to protect our assets. We need to choose the correct legal structure will help with that, as well as making sure we have general liability insurance, professional liability insurance, and can reduce a lot of headaches down the road. I see a lot of people saying they're staying on the job. And that's exactly what I did. I worked as a director of finance and administration in a nonprofit, and then I started my business. And it meant working a lot of extra hours, but it was worth it. And so you just have to kind of be prepared for that. So documenting our processes. Hopefully you take more than one piece of advice from me, but if you take just one piece of advice, start documenting your processes from day one. I did not do this, and it was one of my biggest, or is one of my biggest regrets, and it's still one of my biggest challenges even today. So I had never really considered that my firm was going to be larger than a solopreneur, or, just myself. And as it grew, and I needed to hire employees, I did not have anything documented, which meant that it was a real struggle trying to train them to service clients because everything was in my brain. And so continually trying to get information out of your brain and into documents when you're already very busy is difficult. So I would say always make sure you're documenting your processes, how you're servicing your clients from the outset. So when I hired my first employee, I had to train them again on every single detail and the tools that we used internally. And 5 years on, I'm still trying to build out a learning management system for clients as well as employees. So why is this important? Outside of the reasons I just gave you, it maintains consistency internally and with clients. It increases your ability to scale with ease. It helps eliminate errors because you have your same process that you're using every month. Even myself, after doing this for a long time, if I don't follow the processes that I've created, occasionally I'll do something differently. And, that just makes your work more prone to errors. And it improves the employee and client onboarding process. And to me, this one is huge because one of the very early interactions that we have with our employees and with our clients is the onboarding process. So you want it to start these relationships off in the best way possible. And I'm seeing some questions come in. How do you train without getting burnt out when it takes a while to find the right person? It's a difficult balance. And I think for myself, I'm actually going through this process right now with a new employee. And what I have done is I set aside so many hours a day of training where I am live training her. And then I have supplemental training information as well. So that seems to be what works for me. And so overall, process documentation is going to make our lives so much easier.